Excited to be here. We'll share some slides to give you a little background on kind of what we're building and then some specific projects we're working on. Hopefully everyone can see my slides. Yeah, so just quickly, the purpose of NatureQuant is to bring technology into the arena of examining how nature affects many aspects of our lives, with a particular focus on human health. As I think we all can appreciate, our world is very complicated. It's kind of a messy web of inputs and outputs, and we feel like the best way to find relationships within that web and detangle it, if you will, is with a big data approach. And so that's really what we're doing. And we do that through a few technologies that I'll just quickly touch upon and then hop into some of the specific projects. The first is a kind of like a Google Maps for nature, if you will. It's called NatureScore. It's a location intelligence platform that we're constantly updating, and it's dynamic in nature. And the second is a mobile app, which passively tracks the environments that people spend their time in, primarily indoors, outdoors, and then a subset of outdoors, which we call NatureDose, which then reverts back to our map really to tell us, what's around you when you are outside, essentially. I'll take one more minute to just kind of provide more detail on those. As I mentioned, NatureScore is really a location intelligence platform. We've aggregated at this point over 30 different remote sensing technologies, GIS databases, if you will, that give us a very precise understanding of what's on the ground where. Many elements of nature, bodies of water, parks, tree canopy, live biomass, and in some instances, even species level data. And then obviously all the human modifications, so the building footprints and highways and impervious surface data. But where this really gets exciting is when we then pair all of our location intelligence with geotagged health outcomes. So where people live and their prevalence of disease rates or where they spend their time and the indications of things like mental distress, cardiovascular disease, etc. And we're finding very, very powerful relationships between all of our location intelligence and a number of health outcomes, which you probably are all familiar with through, the 50 years of literature on this now. We just bring a new kind of more granular and bigger data approach to these relationships. The algorithm's constantly updating because we use an AI process to optimize it as we get more location intelligence and more health data. But as you can see, we've paired our NatureScore data against many health outcomes, and the relationships are consistently quite strong. And one cool thing we're actually applying it to now, I'm excited to announce this because it's coming out in the next month, is looking at how basically nature impacts urban heat islands. As I think many people know, urban forestry is one of the best ways to mitigate heat. And we have all the location intelligence around every aspect of nature within cities. And we now have ground level temperature data from one of our partners called Kappa Strategy. So we got funding from the U.S. Forest Service to launch a national map, really showing the relationship between urban heat island risk and urban forestry. And this will be open source. So any researcher or nonprofit or municipality will be able to access this data to really see how their urban forestry is impacting urban heat island risk within their city and potentially mitigate it. So here's another kind of visual of what those maps are going to look like. It's pretty granular. It's 10-meter gridded data throughout all urban zones, and then we often deliver it as census tract and census block as well if you want more of a neighborhood level look at it. So that'll be coming out the next month. Keep a heads up for that. And again, it's funded by the U.S. Forest Service, so it'll be open sourced for all. We're excited to pair this with more, again, geotagged health outcomes, not just specific, deaths or health incidents related to heat for particularly hot days. So that's our location intelligence. Again, we broadly call it NatureScore, but it's really a system, a dynamic system to come up with relationships between the presence of natural elements and health outcomes. NatureDose is our mobile app, which again passively tracks where you spend your time, indoors, outdoors, and in nature. And where this gets very exciting is where we start pairing it with biomarkers, often collected from wearables like smartwatches or mood surveys. And we look at relationships between how much time you're spending outdoors, and particularly outdoors in nature, and what kind of health events are occurring. And we've done this with mental health, things like sleep quality, resting heart rate, and we're doing it more now over the long term with things like incidence of disease and obesity. We actually just finished a survey. We had about 4,500 people throughout the country using NatureDose, and we attempted to have it be a representative sample. And we found that the average amount of time that Americans are spending outdoors is about 5% of their lives. And these numbers don't add up perfectly because of the way NatureDose is calculated, but of that 5%, roughly half of it is what we would call in proximity to nature. So I think most people are familiar with this, but this again hammers home the point that we are really spending almost all of our lives indoors, and when we're outside, we're often not exposed to nature. We're in urban zones. And so we'll be able to share this data. This is not kind of preprint information, but we have it at a more granular level by demographic, by income level, education level, by region, ethnicity, et cetera. And you'll see there's pretty distinct differences in where people are spending their time based on their demographics and also based on their region. But we're excited to bring this to kind of the world because we feel like NatureDose is the first tool that's existed to be able to kind of generate this type of data in a granular format at scale. It's called, well, maybe in the chat when I'm done talking, I'll give you a little link to the webpage if anyone wants to see more of this data and kind of track as we publish more details. And I just wanted to provide a few other examples of how our technology is used. And if anyone on this call wants to reach out, we're always excited to do more research. As I mentioned, we can pair NatureDose data, which is really a permanent measurement of where you spend your time, with things like mood. And on the Nature Score side, which is a location intelligence tool, we can look at where people live and the incidence of things like mental health. And we don't always find statistically significant relationships, but we generally do. I mean, I think this group knows quite well that nature does have a profound impact on our health. And our new technologies hopefully can shed more light on those relationships. Two other things I want to quickly hit. We won an award to launch in the EU through the European Commission. We're now part of a project called Go Green Next, where we'll be in a handful of kind of pilot cities throughout Europe. And what's interesting about Europe is they have giant biobanks. So we will be able to pair our data with larger data sets of human health outcomes based on location. And we're also going to have probably 20 to 30,000 people using NatureDose. And again, pair how much time they spend outside, and particularly outside in nature, against their health expense. Okay, so I know that was quick, but just wanted to give everyone an update on the technology available. Please reach out if anyone wants to collaborate.
Thank you,
Looking
Jared.
forward to questions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll have everyone hold questions till all four presenters have gone. So jot your questions down real quick if you haven't. I know I have a few. So thank you for that. And then yeah, Jared, if you wanted to share that link in the chat, that would be a great place for it.
Yep.
All right. And Laura, I believe I saw you pop on here. You'll be next. You should have the ability to share screen if you need to, and hop right into it. But please do introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, everyone. Presenting here from the Midwest. Love to know if anybody else is from the Midwest, but it's very toasty today. I just turned the air conditioner on my house. We're in the process of moving, and so I apologize a little bit for my delay. And I'm presenting from Oak Park, Illinois, which is just adjacent to the Western community in Chicago. So I just want to say before I get started, this is a framework that is yet to be implemented as we have imagined it. We're waiting for mayors and municipalities and everything to move forward, but we are hoping to begin to implement this fall. Next slide.
one would think. Oh, Nellie. Is this the correct one?
Yeah. So a little bit about myself. So I was the former director of Nature, Culture, and Human Health Network, and I work with Dr. Terry Horton at Northwestern. I was the first staff person and the last. The funding was not continued, and last summer, the last project we worked on was the Chicago Heat Vulnerability Index, which Northwestern has been working on in partnership with the city of Chicago. And it's very much a community-based approach. And before that, I was on the steering committee of NCH2 and have been working in the healthcare field for over 25 years on Capitol Hill and in Chicago at the University of Chicago Hospital and Medical Center, and mostly with community health there. And in the meantime, I'm also a naturalist through Extension, certificate in ecosystem services. I'm a tree keeper with Open Lands, which is the largest conservation organization here in the Midwest from the late 1960s. And I also am a nature guide that have supported all different kinds of people who are looking for restoration in nature in the area. Next slide. So this is of no surprise to all these folks here on this call that better health can be achieved through nature. This is part of our mission statement from NCH2. And as many of you know, that's through the lens of the participant. One thing I learned loud and clear in COVID is that everyone doesn't experience time in nature uniformly. And the privilege of being able to feel safe and welcome in nature is also dependent on your race, your gender. And so we very much had that approach at NCH2 that, we couldn't assume how people could experience nature as well as the health benefits of spending time in nature. So I was proud that we really focused on the diverse experience of people and in nature in the nearby area in Chicago. Next slide. And you all, I'm assuming you know about the One Health concept with WHO, that truly what is good for our planet is good for people, especially certainly with the WHO in terms of disease vectors and making sure that we are taking care of one another and taking care of our ecosystems. And so with this framework, I'm working on a concept myself and excited about implementing this at a very micro level here on the west side of Cook County in Chicago. Next slide. So we are looking at, one of the things that we did with NCH2 is we had microgrant planning process, microgrant process for planning small new nature areas in communities with under resources, especially with nature spaces. And so it's the intersection of sort of community health, equity, and climate mitigation. And so it's sort of nuanced the three intersectional goals about trying to get the fields of public health, climate action, and conservation working together to create new nature spaces in the Justice 40 communities in the Chicago region, improving health and well-being, and mitigating the effects of climate events through heat, rain, and flooding and air quality. The reason why I'm really wanting to encourage these multiple lenses is with so much funding reduction in climate action that we need to start asking more of our public and private dollars. And wouldn't it be great if every time we put in a new nature space, it's also helping biodiversity and also our climate challenges. Next slide. And so this is in progress, but our partners, so we, my spouse and myself, we have a small donor advised fund. And so I'm putting up a chunk of funds to start this process. And the funds are going to go to fill in the gaps. For you all who might not be familiar with green infrastructure, most of the funds goes towards planning and implementation. So planting the trees, planting all the milkweed and other kinds of nourishing plants, but there's no funding typically for the time spent to maintain, to weed, to water. And many communities, especially under-resourced communities, they just don't have the resources. And so often all the funds that are invested in creating this infrastructure is either taken out or dies. The trees suffer, so do the plants and the nature spaces. So the funds will go towards planning and planting, but also towards watering and maintaining through nonprofit organizations. Open Lands that I mentioned, they are planting trees all over the place. And so they actually have a community grant process where they will just provide the trees to plant in these communities. And our infrastructure mainly is with this cross-community climate collaborative. They're known as C4. They're mostly BIPOC and non-minority communities that are coming together to really focus on climate action in communities that have limited resources. And then a former colleague of mine has just started his own native landscaping firm, and he's also really working with municipalities, businesses, not-for-profit organizations, and residents to create green infrastructure and improve biodiversity with his planning. So I just wanted to say that we're hoping to kick this off in the fall, but if we have to plan over the fall and then plant in late spring, that will be good. So it's just a rough framework. I'm welcome to any questions.
All right, thank you. Is there anything else you want to add before I close the slides?
Nope.
All right, excellent. Thank you for that. We'll have some questions at the end, I'm sure. All right, next up we have Heidi. And let me know if you need to do similar things in the slides or something if it's acting squirrely. Oh, there you go.
All right. Can see the slides? Great. Awesome. So I'm going to keep walking here. We're going to talk a little bit about the therapeutic pathways. So Dr. Heidi Schreiber-Pan, I have a PhD in clinical mental health counseling, and we at the Center for Nature-Informed Therapy, we're a new nonprofit that is really trying to bring mental health care and nature into therapeutic spaces. And so I want to tell you about a recent project that we're working on. So this is the therapeutic pathways model. We are looking to partner with gardens, botanical gardens, nature centers to create a program where people combine certain things, like they're going to do a self-guided walk. They're going to go through stations. And each station will have a mental health theme, such as resilience, grief and loss, anger. And the way we got the themes, we had a survey that went out to a number of mental health professionals, and we were asking, what are the main mental health challenges that you see? And so we looked through the surveys, and we were able to see that a lot of people are bringing in things like grief and loss they haven't processed yet, or the stress, anxiety, and things like that. So we ended up creating this self-guided walk where each station in a park would guide people through reflections and visualization exercises. And then after they walk it, they then meet with a small group of people online and do some processing of thoughts that have come up, insights. And then it goes over 3 months. And so let me tell you a little bit more about it. So why did we come up with this therapeutic pathways? Well, what we're seeing even before COVID is there's a rising mental health needs we're seeing this in all the different ages. There is already an uptick in anxiety before even COVID. We all know here on this call that nature has something to offer and nature heals. We also are noticing that there is in many areas a need for therapy or therapeutic engagement, but perhaps it's not available, or people don't have the insurance, or it's time consuming, or whatever. There's obstacles for people to reach to receive therapy. So we were thinking about a program that not just brought people into nature, but also where they were guided to do mental health work. And so it's self-empowering, yet they are guided to make connections with the natural world. But we also felt that with loneliness that people are experiencing and the need for social contact and bonding, we also felt really strongly that there needed to be a community aspect to this. So we didn't want people to just walk through their stations, do their reflection exercises, and do their deep breathing, but we also wanted them to feel like they're part of a community of people that were doing this at the same time, that they could have conversation with about how things were going. And then, of course, we also know that when we foster care for the natural world, we see a correlation between caring and conservation. So we see this a lot with our individual clients. A lot of them are coming in for maybe help with anxiety, and not necessarily realizing that we're going to do bring nature in as our co-therapist. But at the end of the treatment, they have built a connection with the natural world. And we talk about reciprocity, and we talk about how can we give back. And so making nature a partner in their healing often turns into more care and conservation. So who's the target audience? Well, we're looking at adults that would like some mental wellness support for stress, anxiety, grief, burnout, people that are navigating life transitions such as caregiving, loss or retirement. So a sample station might be, we have our first station that we call Cultivating Rootedness. And once they go to the first station, they're guided to do a mindful observation. We're doing this right now, the pilot, at a local botanical garden. And the first station is at a big old maple tree. And they're guided to the maple tree. And what they do is they're asked to observe the maple and noticing how the maple has some scarring, but also guiding them to think about the root system and how many storms it has weathered. They're also then asked to do a little grounding. There's a QR code that they can scan, which will bring them to an audio file. And that audio file is going to help them do a visualization activity where they're feeling against the tree, leaning against it. They're going to ask about the steadiness and resilience. And then they're going to do another QR code where they are doing a little psycho-ed, where they're taught the 3 qualities of highly resilient people. And then they go on to the next station after they've done some of the reflection. So that's one of the sample stations. The communal aspect of it is that we do these virtual check-ins where they do some processing. They have space where they can share what has come up for them during their walk, any insights, what did they notice about themselves or their connection with the maple, or even just sharing observations of the maple itself. There's going to be some shared learning. We're also going to gather as community before we start the walk, because people are going to do an orientation. So we're going to show them the route. We're going to show them where the stations are so that they don't feel like they have to remember exactly where to go. We're going to give them a chance to set intentions. Why are you here? What are you hoping to get from this? And then when it's over, we're going to do a post-walk closure where we're going to share insights and kind of takeaways and what we want to move forward with. The program structure, it's 3 months. We're asking people to do 4 self-guided walks. So there will be 1 walk per week. And then they're going to have 1 online group per month. And then we have, like I said, the orientation and the closure. Our objectives is we want to evaluate how self-guided nature experiences impact our mental, emotional, and ecological well-being. We're working with the University of Maryland to help us with our data set. We're designing with the University of Maryland a pre and post survey that people will have access to through a QR code. The 5 core domains that we're looking at is the reduction of anxiety and stress. We're looking at cognitive clarity. We're looking at social connectedness. We're also going to assess some of the spiritual well-being, and then also nature relatedness. And what we're anticipating is that we will see a significant improvement across all the domains. We have done another pilot where we saw a high well-being cluster post a nature therapy group. And so this was kind of our hope for our anticipation. So the Ladue Gardens is where the pilot is happening today. So we are currently have people that are moving through the stations to see how long is it taking them, getting feedback, what works, what doesn't work. So this is happening right now. I was invited to the Ukraine a few months ago where I trained 41 Ukrainian park rangers and botanical garden volunteers. And the reason we were invited was because of the war in Ukraine. A lot of people there are turning to the gardens and the parks for solace. And when we asked them, what is it that you need? And they said, well, when the war ends, we want people to come to the parks and the gardens and have a program that they can be part of, that where people can process some of that trauma, some of the loss that has happened to them. And at the same time, Ukraine doesn't have enough mental health professionals. So they wanted a program that didn't necessitate licensed mental health professionals, but that could be guided by someone that we can train to facilitate this. And our hope is that eventually this not just goes to the Ukraine, but that we can reach out to other botanical gardens and parks and bring this type of program to parks and places like that to integrate nature. And we're, of course, also looking for funding. We have funding for a pilot. So if you know of any grants, please send them my way. Brand new nonprofit, so I'm still learning. And then in closing, I just want to say a landscape is not just a place, it's a path we walk towards ourself. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. And thanks for putting your contact info up too. That's always handy for anybody who has to scoot out early. All right. And then finally, we have Pooja joining us.
Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. Like you're not seeing it in. Okay. Are you seeing the correct part of the presenter scene? Or are you seeing my notes or?
We're seeing the main slide and the next slide. No, and where notes would be.
Okay. How's that? Is that a full screen on your end?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for having me. Nice to see you all. My name is Pooja Tandon. I'm a pediatrician. I'm the health director at the Trust for Public Land and professor at the University of Washington. I'm speaking today from the Seattle area. And my goals today are to tell you a little bit about work that we've been doing around evaluating TPL's green community schoolyards, specifically in Tacoma, Washington, a little bit about the approach and a little bit about some of the results as well. Okay, I'm gonna Advance my slides. So for this audience, it's not new information that schoolyards are an underutilized resource, and really when we know that building parks is not possible in some spaces, schoolyards can provide a major spatial resource. They're in every community, often within walking distance to large proportions of the population, and can provide spaces for children and through shared use agreements, potentially people of all ages to have access to parks and green spaces and places for health promoting behaviors. The slide advancer disappeared. There we go. So this work takes place in Tacoma, Washington, which is the third largest city in Washington state, and has one of the largest park access gaps in our state. And I want to just give a little bit of background on Trust for Public Lands Community Schoolyard Program that has renovated nearly 350 public school spaces over the last 20 years, all around the country, and now also working with tribal communities in parts of our country. And it's based on three fundamental principles: that schoolyards must be designed for and by the community. We really pride ourselves on a participatory approach where students, teachers, staff, and local community members are engaged in the schoolyard design process. That those schoolyard spaces should be shared. We work hard to, and it looks different in different communities around what those shared use agreements can look like. While many features are often present in these transformed schoolyards, certainly nature and green elements are often core to what's provided. Schoolyards also provide multiple benefits with regard to climate resilience, heat mitigation, noise, air pollution. So there's multiple benefits and pathways through which renovated green schoolyards, community schoolyards can promote health and health equity. This is just a compilation of some pictures from one of our projects where their students are involved in the schoolyard design and learning, and go through a structured curriculum over 8 to 12 weeks to learn and provide their input. This particular project that I'm talking about today was part of what we're calling a broadly engaged team science approach. It was funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Interdisciplinary Research Leaders Program. We applied and got it in early 2020, and so a lot of the timeline and the program was a little different than we had anticipated because of the COVID pandemic and the school shutdown. But nevertheless, we were able to finish up or complete a lot of the work that we intended to do. It was a collaboration between Seattle Children's Hospital, University of Washington, and Trust for Public Land, and has really been, for me, very transformational in my own learning, and actually was the reason that, were one of the main reasons that I ended up at Trust for Public Land. When we started this project, I was the Seattle Children's Hospital partner in this grant that you apply as academics and community partners together. So the three kind of investigators in this program were myself, Dr. Kathy Wolf, and who's a social scientist, and Carrie Simmons, who's still at TPL. And I want to also acknowledge the large team of interdisciplinary collaborators and community partners that supported this work. I won't be speaking about all of the research studies and the kind of group of studies that we did, but I wanted to highlight the different types of work that we did. Some of it were pivots from what we had originally intended, but we wanted to look at both the impact of the participatory design process, and we did that by working with, doing student surveys, focus groups, and teacher interviews on the impact of students themselves having a role in designing their schoolyard, in what it might do for their self-efficacy, their sense of hope and empowerment as change agents, particularly during the time of the pandemic. Number two is what I'll speak mostly about in the last few minutes with regard to impact on physical activity and social interactions and play behaviors of children. We also did an audit of the 10-minute walk area around the schoolyard. One of the key components of these community schoolyards is that the Tacoma schools and the parks agency there through shared use agreement were making this space available. So we wanted to look at what is the access to the schoolyard in terms of walkability in the nearby built environment. And finally, we did a youth participatory action research project with older children. So high school students who, although the renovation was in the elementary school yards, we learned that many of the students who use these spaces after hours are often older children. Maybe they went to that school when they were younger, or it's the closest and only public space available to them. So using audio and video, we engaged in this project to understand how they were using outdoor spaces, including schoolyards during the pandemic. So I'm going to focus on the physical activity and community usage outcomes that we looked at. I mean, one thing that wanted to mention is, schoolyards are certainly an equitable and very common space for children to engage in physical activity, especially during recess and maybe before and after hours as well. However, the research on the physical activity benefits or outcomes related to schoolyard transformation are not as solid as you might expect, and often limited by small study designs, not having control groups, not collecting data before and after. And so those were the things that we were hoping to address, at least with the sample of schoolyards that we were working with. So our research aims were to study the changes in physical activity and schoolyard usage from before to after renovation. We were focusing on 2 intervention schools and then a third control school that was matched in size and student demographics. And then we wanted to understand a bit more about how different features and schoolyard areas were related to physical activity. And we hypothesized that physical activity and after hours usage would be higher in the transformed schoolyards compared to the control school. Just highlight some of the methods that I haven't mentioned yet. The tool we used, or we decided to use at the time, was something called SoOpen. Some of you may be familiar with, there are a whole range of validated observation tools out there, SoPlay, SoPark. This one looks at group level activity, which we thought was important for the ways in which young children engage in schoolyards and during recess. And so it allows for groups as the unit of analysis. And it's a momentary time sampling technique where trained observers scan parts of the schoolyard, different target areas, and kind of note down how physically active people are, who's in the group, and what type of activity they're doing. Our baseline paper has been published, so I just wanted to mention that. And what we're focusing on now are the pre-post results. These are just some pictures from one of our schools, and transformations included addition of trees and vegetation, native plants, and also things like playground equipment and markings on the blacktop areas that have been, in some studies, shown to promote physical activity as well. Importantly, this sign, we invite and welcome our community to enjoy this space during non-school hours. So as I mentioned, that was a key component of TPL's community schoolyards. I have 2 slides of results that I'll just quickly go through. This first one is looking at the effect of schoolyard renovation on moderate to vigorous physical activity just during recess time. In kind of all groups of children, we did see that the probability of groups engaging in moderate to vigorous physical activity was 1.5 times higher at the intervention schools compared to the control school. This was statistically significant and mostly driven by the groups of boys, but in general, the same gender groups versus the mixed gender groups. This is a little bit different than a few other studies that have found that the physical activity in groups of girls was higher after renovating schoolyards. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight was that schoolyard renovation was associated with 3.2 fold greater increase in use by the community after hours, especially by child-only groups. And again, these could be children or young people of any ages, but not as much in the sort of multi-generational use. So to kind of summarize in this very brief presentation is the idea that we did see an increase in physical activity in children, especially in boys. We saw greater community use after the renovation, especially among children. And at least at one school, I didn't go into these results, that children were 41% more likely to engage in MBPA in the grassy and natural areas compared to the paved zones. But of course, more research and larger studies are needed. Schoolyards are so different from one to the other. But we felt that our study design was rigorous, and we're excited to get this information out there. This manuscript is currently under review. And I'll wrap up by just putting this slide up where it's not so much about the results of the project, but really that what we learned from this kind of large team, broadly engaged team science, where we were able to be nimble during the pandemic. We had a funder that was also willing to be flexible and allowed us to change what we realized we couldn't do. For example, collect academic outcomes in children because the schools just weren't collecting them in the same way. And required a lot of patience and persistence with IRBs and MOUs and subawards, but it was a rewarding experience. And anytime that we were able to meet in person, food and beverages certainly helped. So I will, and I can drop my contact information in the chat since I realized I didn't have it in the last slide, but happy to answer questions later as well.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. That was wonderful. And I really appreciated that last slide on the teamwork aspect. Now that's all of our presentations for today. I do just want to remind everyone this is just a casual gathering, so do not feel like you cannot ask a question. I want everyone to be able to just chime in with any thoughts, questions, or potentials for collaboration there. And so now, in that, I'm going to open the floor to anybody and everybody to ask our panelists questions.
Pooja, would you mind elaborating on what the renovation typically entailed? Was it mostly the removal of concrete and replaced by like grassy fields, or did it also have play structures or other elements?
All of those things, and typically that is a part of that design process with community input. So, for example, there was in one of the schools a large grass area, but it was often muddy and unusable. There was no walking track there. So in renovating it, and this school actually was right along a major highway as well in Tacoma. So there were trees that were planted kind of along the side that was closest to the highway, a walking path that was put in, and then some work done on the grassy field to make it more usable and playable, and especially Seattle year-round weather in terms of drainage and things like that. But then other parts of that school where there were already, there was kind of a blacktop area, there was lines and colors painted to make it playable, benches and native plants in another area, and some new play equipment that was added. In another school, there was a small stage that was requested by the school community. So they put in a stage in an area where events and performances could happen, a little hill. So that I think has been very popular as children run up and down. So it really varies in terms of, but often has a combination of all of the elements that you mentioned.
Were you able to in any way opine on like which element of renovation was the most impactful?
So there were two schools and the results were different between them.
Yeah.
In one, the grassy field, which was a very large field, ended up being the place with the largest, with the greatest increase in physical activity. In the other, it was the blacktop area with the lines painted on it and basketball courts that have equipment. So I would say that don't have consensus on kind of which one in each space.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll chime in with the question for Heidi, just logistically, about your therapeutic pathways program. Are you planning to implement this just at a local site in Maryland, or are you open to opportunities with other areas, or maybe some certified nature trails, things like that?
Yeah, the hope is that we can take this not just nationwide, but also globally. I think that our connections with Ukraine will be kind of the first place where they're coming in September to look at the Ladue project and how it's going, and then we're hoping that when it's safe to do so, to extend it to the parks in the Ukraine. But we would love to partner with parks and gardens around the nation that want to try to figure out how to bring a mental health program in, that they can sort of combine nature as much as they can with a mental health component.
Yeah, thank you. And also just wanted to throw in that I think it's fantastic that y'all are going to be kind of doing some pre and post kind of surveying measurements there. I was curious if you had a scale or anything that you had found for the spiritual well-being, or if y'all ended up creating those questions on your own.
So we're the University of Maryland is creating for us the whole assessment, but they are looking at the spiritual well-being scale and the spiritual transcendence scale that I've used in my dissertation, with the sense of finding something that feels like we're part of something bigger, and that's often what people talk about when they're experiencing nature. So influenced by those two scales, but yeah. It's going to go into that
Very cool.
5 domains.
Thank you.
It's okay. I'm going to jump in. Heidi, it's been a while. It's nice to see you. I have a question. As you begin to roll out your program, do you think that you're going to make it accessible to people of, different sensory abilities? So
Yes. So for right now, one of the interests that we've been getting a lot is, can we create the similar program for children? So that will probably be our first adjustment and I think it would probably be very easily done for children to have that same experience. And then after that, we'll see what populations come next. The one thing that we've been thinking about, Murakami, which is garden in Florida that has done a very similar thing. And what they have found is they have gotten funding from like the Hospice Foundation for people that are grieving. And so you can then have people that are all grieving go together on that 3 months program. And so creating sort of that sort of sense of community within people that are having the same experiences or similar experiences. But yeah, I was curious what you were thinking in terms of when you hear about the therapeutic pathways and in terms of the sensory piece. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Thinking about people who have visual challenges or are deaf or hard of hearing, or even, people who are neurodiverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Amy.
Of course, you're welcome. And if I can just kind of keep jumping in, kind of on the same topic, but with Jared, I think it's really exciting to learn about. I mean, I've followed you for a long time. I think NatureQuant's really great. The whole app concept, I think it's, because it's, accessible via, wearable technology. I think that it has really, really exciting implications for sort of identifying the impact of nature connections for people such as those who are autistic and have difficulty with communication, or older adults with dementia. I think that it will be able, the biometric data that will be able to be collected is really, really, really important and exciting. So
Yeah, thanks for that, Amy. I mean, obviously, I think so too. But I think beyond being able to identify these connections between nature exposure and health is we're hoping that we can use technology to kind of proliferate that knowledge to the masses, because I think most people don't think about it on a daily basis. And we know they're looking at their phone for 7, 10 hours a day. So if we can nudge them to get outside a little more often, and because of the health impacts that we now know are to be true, I think that's where we'll really see the reward.
Yeah, I'll be happy to tell you at this moment, I don't actually know where my phone is, and it's kind of freeing. It's exciting.
I know that's the irony that we always run into is we don't want people looking at their phone, but they need it on them to
Sure.
get the data.
Thank you.
And Howie, I saw you
Uh,
patiently.
Yeah, thanks to all four speakers. Really nice presentations. Jared, a couple of questions for you. I've had some concerns with Nature Score. I wonder if I could just raise a couple of those and ask you to
Please.
comment. Um, One is that when a new measurement technique is introduced, typically the people who invent it and introduce it are pretty transparent about what goes into it. So if you have an index, whether it's walk score or the GDP or the GPA, whatever it is, typically anybody who wants to look under the hood can do that. But if I understand correctly, Nature Score is the product of machine learning
It
and
is.
AI, and it's actually non-transparent.
Well, we can show you
So-
the weights that each AI system produces, i.e. which natural elements are contributing to the score. But every time you rerun it, they're going to be different. And depending on what target health outcome you're looking at, they're going to be different. So it's kind of meaningless to say here is Nature Score. That's not really what it is. It's a system that provides information about the relationship between all of these elements by location and any observed outcome. Urban heat islands, health, mood, whatever you want to look at. So it's not like a walk score or any other score where it's a static thing. It's really a system. And so we can show you how the system works, but like any AI process, you're not going to really, see anything that you can then go back in time or apply elsewhere. It's going to be updated constantly because it gets better and better. I mean, the truth of where you see the value in it is you can give me any list of individuals and where they live, and I can predict with probably better accuracy than anybody else how that environment is impacting their health outcomes. And so the truth is in the predictability of the algorithm, not so much, the score, if you will. And that's really,
So-
I think, what the value of AI is generally, is it's the most predictive method we've come up with.
Yeah, well, I think all of us are learning how to deal with AI systems. So it is a whole different paradigm than a typical measurement technique. And I just wanted to fix on one thing you just said that Pooja also brought up, which is that nature is very variable, and nature in one place is different than nature in another place. And the ways in which nature in one place delivers benefits may be very different than the ways in which nature in another place delivers benefits. So,
Yeah.
talk if you would about that. I guess I just heard you say that whatever Nature Score measures in place one may be different than what it measures in place two. And that kind of goes back to my first question, which is, can we expect that each time there's a study done, you'll kind of show us what the relative weights are so people can begin to dig into what actually is it about nature in this place that seems to deliver benefits? I haven't seen any of the sort of the relative weights that you talked about
Sure.
presented in any of the
yeah, we could.
presentations.
I mean, obviously Phoenix and Seattle, and you're just capturing different elements that contribute to the nature score. And so the weighting of the algorithm changes by region, by time, and again, by kind of whatever goal you're seeking. And so we can provide those weights by study, but they're not static. The next time you run the study, the environment's going to be different and the target outcome is going to be different. So AI is really a system where we can provide the weighting, but the next day, just like any AI system you're using, it's outdated, right? It's constantly adapting. And so I would love actually your input on what do you think is the best way to provide transparency on the system so people can utilize it to its best effect going forward. So I mean, it's I think a struggle not just in our little company with our little application of AI, but broadly when AI is used for science, it's just a black box consistently. And so while we see these amazing results, we struggle with pulling meaning out of it sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we need help with. We need a community to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I saw Lolita had a hand up as well.
Yes, I like the presentation on the nature dose. So I have one question on that. So like in first few slide, like you said about the relationship between the nature dose and some of the health outcomes. So can you share like which are the chronic diseases linked with the nature doses you have found in this study?
Well, we've done a
Yeah.
number of different studies.
Okay.
We've looked at cardiovascular disease, mental health, and we're not alone. I mean, there are many elements of nature that have been, kind of strongly associated with all types of health outcomes. So with Nature Score, we usually have population health either through, some kind of longitudinal study like the Nurses Health data set or the Twin study where people have been tracked for the last 50 plus years and we know where they've lived and what kind of environments they've been in, and then the incidence of certain diseases. And often we actually just look at longevity, so all-cause mortality, like who is living the longest based on what type of environment they're in. But that's changing now that we have this mobile app and we know really on a minute by minute basis what kind of environment people are in and they're wearing smartwatches. I mean, there's 50 million people in the US alone wearing Apple Watch, right? So we know every minute what their heart rate is. We know when they get sick, right? Their body temperature goes. We know how they're sleeping. We know their stress level through heart rate variability. We can see distinct and almost instantaneous changes when someone gets outside into a nature-rich environment. And so going forward, I think pairing our technology with these, ever-growing data sets of biomarkers is going to provide us unique insight. And we've done this to some extent on, small-scale studies, but, like what we're doing with the European Commission group, where we'll have about 30,000 people. And I think hopefully with more studies in the US, we'll really be able to understand, okay, I went out in this type of park for 20 minutes, and here's what happened to my health outcomes immediately after.
Yeah, because like what I learned from other research, like based on the CDC guideline about the physical activity, like minimum 300 minutes in a week, that also link with the health, some of the health outcomes. So it will be an interesting study. One more question, like you said, the Heat Island data, the public data available. So that is with the like USFS or through the Nature Dose, you are saying?
So that's in partnership with US Forest Service and the Arbor Day Foundation. And
Oh,
that'll
okay.
be publicly available for basically every urban area in the US at 10-meter resolution. And what that does is it's unique in that we now have ground level temperature data. So we've transversed cities with cars with literally a thermometer sticking out the window and taken the temperature 2 meters above ground throughout the cities. So we know where it's hot, and then we know what the locations are like with our nature score. So we know what elements are around where it's hot. And again, we used AI to create a very powerful predictive model of where you're going to see these urban heat islands. And it, not surprisingly for everyone in this group, it's where there's no nature, where you have dense buildings, tall buildings, these urban canyons, if you will, is where you see the heat. And so we can now show that with accuracy and detail to everyone. So urban forestry or other mitigation strategies can be employed with a more precise tool.
Thank you. Thank you.
All I can see is L. Weber, so I'm sorry, not sure how to address you, but
Yes.
so you have
I'm Lou. So thank you. My questions first are for Heidi. And I'm wondering, in these groups that form online, is someone monitoring that?
Yeah, so we're gonna train facilitators how to facilitate. And so that was the hope for a lot of these parks and gardens because they have volunteers usually. And so it would be a screening process, and then we would train the volunteers to become facilitators and how to do that.
And then Heidi, any chance you're going to the Ecological Society of America meeting in a couple of weeks in Baltimore?
No, but it sounds like a place I should be showing up.
Yes. Let me know if you're going to go. I'll be there too, and we could talk more.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
And Taylor, is this recording going to be available for us if, say, I wanted to show it to my environmental psychology class?
Absolutely. Yep. I'll share it out.
Thank
I'll
you.
edit it to get rid of all the pauses and stuff, but we'll, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's it for me.
I budgeted us plenty more time, so if anyone has questions, you don't have to raise your hand, you can just chime in.
I think I'll throw a question out to the group. You know, it's more a rhetorical question that if we can identify where truly there's no nature and nature that can protect the communities that live nearby in heat effects and flooding effects, and there's no federal funds to implement those new nature spaces, then where are the funds going to come from? Is it only going to be in blue states where the you know, we can put in the infrastructure that will protect those communities? I'm just curious what people think.
I will say we've had some conversations with groups like Blue Sky Funders Forum and people who work more in the environmental funding type of space. And we're working on figuring out what the overlaps are for the nature and health type of segment. We've had kind of this break between healthcare funding and grants and, you know, green and environmental focus. A lot of those tend to want to fund specifically a program that gets someone outside. But we're working closely with groups like that to kind of try and figure that out. But we have had more interest actually from southern states and groups that we wouldn't have first anticipated. I'm in Texas right now, and a lot of them have been through kind of hunting and fishing groups and things like that. So I think there is still hope there for that, but we're going to have to get a little creative about who we're approaching and kind of what these outcomes are. But we are working specifically NHA with some groups like that to try and figure out what is needed, you know, what rhetoric needs to be used to reach the right groups, what stories to tell. So I think it's a huge question for all of us to move forward.
Well, I certainly don't have any answers, but I'll tell you one approach we're taking, which is trying to come up with a formula to demonstrate the healthcare expense reductions that these interventions can kind of impart on a community. And that's much easier to then sell when you have a single payer healthcare system like overseas. But here in the States, you know, there are some very wealthy, large insurance groups that want to reduce their expense. And if they can see a great ROI by planting trees or putting park spaces around their members, maybe we can help them do that. We did do one study with Kaiser Permanente where we compared essentially nature-rich communities and nature-poor communities, and holding everything else constant, the nature-rich communities cost Kaiser $400 less per person per year. People are just healthier. They just cost less when they have access to nature. And so if we can scale that kind of economic model, hopefully we can find more funding to support these kinds of interventions.
Yeah, Jared, that's something that we're also going to be looking into, how to figure out and articulate that. Texas by Nature, which is our fiscal agent, has done this previously for the Return on Conservation Index for Texas programs of, you know, what was the economic value of restoring a watershed area, things like that. And we're looking into like what data is needed to gather that for the healthcare outcomes. And it's a big beast to take on. But yeah, I think you're right that money talks. So that's another key part.
But the problem is, though, that many of these communities rely on Medicaid. And so that's a state argument. And many of red states, especially Texas, they're like 48th in Medicaid spending. So they wouldn't even consider it. I just think any conversations you all are having with funders, I'd be, even RWJ, to sort of expand their idea of what affects health, especially for really fragile communities that are going to be most affected by the climate effects.
We are working with a group in Missouri, a One Health group, trying to figure out if we can get a Medicare Medicaid waiver for a nature and health clinic, which would then also include our app, but it's very early. So we'll see if that goes anywhere.
Good idea, though. Medicaid waiver for that. That would be excellent if you got it.
Yeah, we'll let you know. It's called One Health, and it's the pilot's in Missouri.
Is that with Roger Still, One Health Conservation?
Mhm.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? I don't want anyone to have a question unasked because we've got these experts right here. But otherwise, we can leave for the day. So give everyone a chance. All right. Cool. If you have any questions or anything you want to follow up, looks like the speakers all put their contact information into the chat. Otherwise, you can reach out to me and I'll be sure to pass on the questions to who needs to. And I'll share this recording with everybody. But thank you for coming to our first happy hour. We plan to have more of these. We'll have another one in early August and probably another in October. So I want to just thank all of you.
Thank you, Taylor, as always, for your amazing efforts. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks to all the fabulous speakers.
Yes. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.